please be sure to share it with your friends or go ahead and watch it back. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Nick. I will be watching the chat for questions, and we'll have some time at the end. So feel free to drop any thoughts in there or raise your hand when we get to the Q&A portion, and we'd love to hear from you. With that, it's my pleasure to introduce Nick from the Emma Willard School to tell us about unlocking Blackbaud education management. Nick, take it away.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Hey, folks. I'm Nick Marchese from the Emma Willard School. I'll dive in a little bit here. I've got a QR here that I'll have on all the slides for you to be able to kind of fill out a form, just like sharing your information if you're interested in talking more after the session, but you'll see that as we go through. So just a little bit about me. So I'm the Director of Academic and Strategic Tech here at Emma Willard in Troy, New York. I was previously working in Brooklyn for about 10 years in independent schools. I really am a big fan of Google Apps Script, just to solve all those little problems that need solving. If you're familiar with it, it's fantastic. I recently was learning how to utilize the Blackbaud Sky API for the school API to like increase that productivity with Google Apps Script. And I got 2 little kiddos, and I really love Manhattans. So just a little bit about me, so you know who's talking to you today. Okay, so here's kind of and you can ignore the Google Slides Q&A thing at the top there. We're not doing that today. So a little bit of our agenda here. It's gonna be a quick pace thing, but I'm hoping to get some questions as we go. A little bit about me and how we get here. We're going to dive into like what's the Sky API, why is it worth doing, things like that, and then talk about use cases and show off what I've been able to build so far and what I'm using it for, and then kind of deal with any questions that you have at the end. A little bit of our agenda. Okay, so how do we get here where we are today? So as I shared, like I am an amateur programmer. Both of my degrees are in music education, not anything related to computer science. And so I learned to program using Google Apps Script to solve real world problems, right? Whether that's populating calendars, creating rosters, automating, document creation, so on and so forth. So using the real life problems to learn how to code. And then I was able to, with a lot of help from a lot of different people, learn how to get into the Sky API. And if there are any Tron fans out here, this like I got in is a kind of a recognition of that. So, I had a lot of these solutions in place. And then I was able to get into the API using AppScript to be able to really synchronizing it live data, things just got supercharged and are working in a much more automated way. And that kind of like leads us to where we are today and trying to find ways to share some of that with the community if you are interested in pursuing it. Okay, so let's talk about why you would sync your data instead of just running lists or exporting data manually. So I've got a little bit of a comparison here, like without the Sky API and then with it, right? So without it, which is where I was living for a while until recently and where I'm sure a lot of folks are, right? The data is only up to date based on the last time you pulled it out, right? So you go in, you run that list or you run that report, you export that CSV file, and it's up to date as the last time you clicked that download button. Right? If there's a data change immediately after that, it's out of date. You need someone to pull that data manually on a computer, right, on their own computer. And then you end up with the many copies of the same Excel or CSV files with the similar names. So these were some examples that I had on my computer at some point. So file names, student list -1, student list -2, student list -1 final, and then student list official. So out of these, which one should I actually be using? I'm sure you've been having some naming conventions that go like this as well, right? 1-2, or like, if you do that really great thing where you write real, use this one in the title, right? So trying to move away from that. So by integrating the Sky API, right, your data is always up to date, right? Because it's immediately there and syncing. So you made a change a few minutes ago, no problem. automatically pulled without any human interaction, right? So you could set this stuff up to be automatically running just in the cloud and running by itself, which means you could get to go on more vacations. You don't have to sit there at a computer and download things. And you don't have to rely on an end user computer or device, right? Maybe you just have your phone one day or whatever it is. So again, that just means more vacations. And then no more copies of duplicate Excel files, right? So what are you going to do with all that extra hard drive space when you don't have so many Excel files on your computer? All right, so let's talk about. I'm gonna go in and show things off as we go here, and I'm moving quickly. Hopefully, we'll get questions at the end. So here are some examples of data that I was able to automate and pull from advanced lists. So we have a bunch of advanced lists running around here for syncing to other systems or just gathering data. So that way we we don't have to be having users go into the back end and run all these through core or whatever. So these are two examples, and I blocked out names. So if anybody uses Apple School Manager or Remind, this left one is very similar to what those formats look like, where you need a whole bunch of CSV files, right? So this is automatically just populating a list into this to go ahead and generate those. And on the top right, which I'll show in a few minutes, is actually a way for, let me move my cursor here, to see group rosters from within Blackbaud. All right. So just a little bit about Sky API basics with endpoints. So there are a ton of endpoints, and they're just growing. Thank you, API team, for continuing to grow the school endpoint collection. So these have really blown up over the last year. This is only a sampling of what those are, but there's this page, this API reference endpoint page that can show all of the different ones, and I'll show you the live document in a second, all the different endpoints. And by endpoints, for those of us who, and I'll explain my low code understanding, right, is the call that you're making to the server to be able to get different data, right? So this example that I have in front of you is one of the first ones that I used, which is to be able to pull a list of all of my lists that I have access to, right? So advanced list and basic lists. So that is, and I'll look at this a little bit here. So here's some other sample API calls that I wanted to kind of focus on, because these are ones that I've been using for different things. So I tried to break it out where you can understand what is being returned, some examples, and then what at least in AppScript, what the little level of code is, right? So here's just some examples. So academics master schedule, to be able to pull the master schedule within a date range, academics or activity sections by school level. So being able to return all the section numbers for all of the classes or all of your activities. Academic students by section. So then what you can do is throw a section number into this and say, oh, I get to see for rosters, right? Like who is in this section of a class or of a group. And then we talked a little bit about the lists, right? The list of lists, which is my favorite one because of the name. And then the list single, right? So is where, okay, we have this full list of all of our lists. I just need the one ID number for the one list and drop it into my list single, and it returns the data that's in that list. Let me show you what that looks like here. So here's that live website. So in my screenshot, I think I only showed like 10 of these, but if I scroll down here, and this is just for the school API, there's a lot of different endpoints here that return all these things on the left side that return a lot of different things depending on what you're looking for, right? So you see a lot of stuff from users, there's a lot of stuff in core, and there's a lot of stuff in athletics and academics. There's other things too. There's admissions and content, resource boards and things like that. But you kind of just have to sift through and figure out what you think might work best for you. And you can see that there's a lot of gets, some like post and delete and patches, but mostly we're talking about pulling data out. Especially in this session, we're talking about pulling data out. And this is a little guide, which I believe is linked on the session page that I was able to create, where it's basically showing some of those endpoints that I think are most helpful and what they are doing. This is a lot of what I just showed you on the previous slide. But there's a couple other here at the bottom, like schedules meetings, which I'm not sure if it's actually in beta anymore, academics, courses, venues, buildings, athletic schedules, to be able to pull some of these data sets out and then go ahead and manipulate them after the fact. Okay, yes, absolutely. That was something that I was able to put together with the Blackbaud team, who made it look really pretty. And I think it's a fantastic thing that I have posted right here on my wall to be able to go ahead and remember what's going on. Okay, so that was really quick run through of a lot of different things. So what I want to do is I kind of just want to show what the end result is for y'all, and just kind of leave it open for questions, and share other ways that I'm using this. So the reason for this session and the script and sheet that I'm going to show off here is for someone who wants to do this sort of work without doing any coding at all. So we've been able to kind of build and modularize that. I can't say that word. Box that up in just a Google Sheet drop-down extension. So that way you don't have to do any actual coding. If you're someone who's like, Nick, I love AppScript, I love JavaScript, show me the code, great. Like, email me and we'll talk about it later. But this was built as a way to just get a kind of like a hello world, a very easy way to get in the door for the general folks. So I'm going to show two sheets here. So these are not live documents, so please do not go to them at this point. In fact, I'm going to lock you down so nobody gets tempted to jump in here right now. Okay, so so here is a basic version of the template that I've been able to share out with some other folks in the past, and there are. I joke, there's about 8 steps to essentially get a AppScript file or program linked fully with a Blackbaud application. And I've tried to nail it down as tightly as I can, and it looks like these are the steps. Now, this formatting is obviously a little bit clunky. There's a docs version here as well that makes it look a little bit cleaner. But essentially, what you're doing is you're creating a application on Blackbaud, and you're connecting the spreadsheet to it, giving it access to the data, and then it's running some of the pre-programmed things that I built into it. So the reason that I'm not sharing this template with you today, and I'm going to ask folks to fill out the QR, actually, I'll even drop the form link directly into the chat right now. It's because I am days away from making a big breakthrough with how it's structured to be able to provide live updates without you having to delete it and redo it again. So I'm showing this off today and hoping that if you are interested in using this, then you be patient. You fill out the form, you give me your contact information, and I will send you a link to the new version within a week or so here. So the form is in the chat if you're interested in getting that when it's available. I will get that to you. Okay, let me talk through what this looks like. So essentially, what you would be doing is you would get this spreadsheet, and there's this nice little custom extension here. It says breaking a Blackbaud, which was a fun term I was using early on, and there's this whole getting started thing. And basically this is a supplement to the instructions in front of you, where you need to get a URL, you need to store your Blackbaud app and app ID, you need to connect it to your environment and authorize it. Now, if you don't know what any of this means, that's totally fine. All these instructions walk you through that with links saying, go here, make an application, go here, create all the things, and then add in your details there. All of the directions are here. And if you follow these to the T, it works totally great. I promise. So those are the directions that getting you set up there. What I want to show is kind of like what the finished product looks like. So here's a kind of a static version that I've made. So what this would look like is after you get started, after you get it all connected, you go through this whole getting started tab, you go back up here and you've got this two things here you can do: syncing your lists or syncing group rosters. So syncing lists, you would do step 1 first, obviously, where it retrieves all lists that you have access to. So what that's doing is it's doing that list of lists endpoint that I talked about before. And it's going to create a new tab and with all of the lists that you have access to, both advanced and basic lists. It's just going to show them all in here and going to make some nice little checkboxes next to it. And then what you can do is check whatever boxes you want a tab in the spreadsheet to automatically sync the data into. So for example, I checked this Nick Large report one, this advisory enrollment, this class of 25. I checked those 3. I went back up to my extension and I did step 2, which was start syncing my lists. And then what that will do from then on, every hour is it's going to create obviously it'll only create the tab the first time, but it's going to create a tab for this, and it's going to bring in the contents of those lists into there. It'll automatically do the headers. It'll go ahead and freeze the first row, and it'll bring that data in. I've blacked out data so that way you're not seeing all the kids' names. And we have same for advisory enrollment. And I've got one that's just a really long dummy data, but it's showing you that it could be really, really long if you needed it to be. And anytime, so like if I have these 3 checked, those will be updating every hour. Every hour seems like a good cadence for those triggers, just to make sure that you weren't maxing out your Blackbaud API quota. Especially depending on how many lists that you're checking and so on and so forth. Easily tweakable if you want to go ahead and boost that up, but you do need to kind of dive into the code just a little bit. And then if you just check any more boxes, it'll automatically create that tab, the new tab, on the next time the whole thing syncs. So you only have to click that step 1 and step 2 one time, and then it's done. And then the other thing that I kind of built in here, and I'll talk a little bit about how I think this should work, is being able to, this came by a request from another tech director, of syncing group rosters. So, everybody, I don't know about y'all, we play this game, right? Of like, where's the actual source of truth with data, right? Is it in these random spreadsheets that a couple of people hold on to, or is it actually in Blackbaud, or is it somewhere in the middle and there's actual no source of truth? So he said, if we could have a way for all of our group rosters to be in spreadsheet form, then we can set that's pulling from Blackbaud. Blackbaud is the source of truth, and it will just keep updating the spreadsheet with what's there. That way, folks don't have to maintain their own spreadsheets. They could just say, okay, we have to make all the changes in Blackbaud, and we'll be able to have a spreadsheet that has all those informations that we can share out more publicly, right? So for instance, I have this, if I click start syncing under group rosters, it'll create a new tab, all group rosters. Again, I blocked out a lot of names, but it would essentially bring in a column for every group. So these are all our groups. I don't know if yours are as crazy as ours. And then it'll bring in the group leader, and it will bring in the student names there. And this could easily be tweaked to be student email addresses instead of student names. That's just, we have it set up right now as student names. And then again, this is updating every hour. So that way it's really easy to keep a consistent and reliable list of data for folks. So the biggest question that folks end up asking me is, okay, well, I don't want all of the people to have access to all of this data. Like, how do we do this? And the idea in my mind, at least how I use this, is this spreadsheet is for you or you and somebody else on your team to maintain and manage. And then let's say you wanted this large report, I don't know why, to be accessible to your your grade deans, your business office, whatever you want it to be. You make a new spreadsheet, make a new Google Sheet, just do an import range to this particular tab in this sheet, and then share that new spreadsheet with that audience. That way, they will only have access to the data that you've imported into that, which would only be this particular tab. So that way, you can have like this collection of all of the things, and then you can kind of parse out the data as you see fit. So with group rosters, right, we want to maybe have the group rosters tab doing an import range into a new sheet and given out to all club heads or deans or whatever it is. So that's the structure that I'm currently using. It works really well. And I think there's lots of different ways folks can do that. Just a quick tangent, and then I want to kind of just open it up. If other ways that, so I am not necessarily using this boxed up solution myself because I'm on the back end doing the code. But I'm able to do other things with this, like syncing Google Calendar events and rosters using the different schedule sets and things like that. I'm able to go ahead and do some automation when it comes to, like I said, some of the Apple School Manager or Remind syncing that, it could be a bit of a struggle if we're not using like ClassLink or Clever or something like that. And there's just a bunch of different ways you're able to continue to leverage this data after the fact. I've had some folks ask me about attendance, about grades, grade alerts. For kids who are, falling below a certain threshold and things like that, all sorts of other ways to extend this. And if you get a little bit more comfortable with the code and the API reference page, there's so many things you can do. One last thing I'll say is if you end up browsing this reference page, the cool thing about this, a couple of cool things about this page actually, is that if I'm on this page here, I can scroll down and it will show you what sample data it would return, right? So here it's saying it would return ID number 1 for that first list. Here's the name, if it's a basic or advanced, a description, when it was last modified, and so on and so forth. And if I go to something else, it'll also tell me, hey, here's generally what the data looks like when it gets returned. And if you have no idea how to do any of this and you don't want to go ahead and get all of this code working, there's this try it button, which is really helpful because then you could just sit there, click it, and it will give you a date, spit back data that you actually have access to right now without typing any code out. So this try it button is actually really fantastic for all of the endpoints. Okay, that was a lot. Another quick thing, just to remind folks, the only reason I am not sharing out a link to the template file today is because I'm very close to making this so much better, and I don't want you to take something and then in 2 days it's out of date kind of a thing, because right now if you go ahead and copy that and something was wrong, then I can't really help you aside from saying, hey, can I see your file, or can you delete it and get this new version? So I'm really hoping that shortly I'll be able to provide a much better version for folks who are interested. So here's the link to that form again, and there's a link to that endpoint reference guide. And I know that was me rambling for 24 minutes, but I'm hoping to I'm seeing some questions come in now, and then Lizzie, should I just kind of tackle them as they're in? Does that make the most sense? Just go with the questions as they go through.
Yeah, I think that works. And just as a reminder, anybody that has a question, post it in the chat, or you can raise your hand and I will let you up on stage if you are the daring type and want to ask Nick face to face.
Awesome. I'll go from the top. So tell us how I got started. I think there's kind of two pieces of getting started here. One is learning how to do stuff with AppScript. So with Google, if you're a Google school, so there's a ton of AppScript tutorials out there just getting started, whether it's sending emails or pulling in data from a spreadsheet. There's a lot of resources on Google Apps Script out there. And I just kind of like started very small about 7 years ago. I'm just like tinkering with, again, finding a real world problem that works for you. And then being able to kind of build it up from there. And then when it came to the API thing, I was trying to, as a music education degree holder, trying to understand the Blackbaud API instructions on doing the authentication. So that just took a bit of, again, pounding my head against the wall and asking people who were smarter than me on ways to do it. So yeah, I'm not sure if that's really helpful, but that's essentially how I got started. Can you talk about the authentication process in the app script code? So Brian, are you, feel free to, I don't know if you're talking about for getting into the Blackbaud side of things specifically, or something different. So I'll speak to it and hopefully this answers your question. So how I have this currently set up is when you make a copy of this, there's 3 pieces of data that are required from Blackbaud to make the connection. And that's going to be your application ID, your application secret, and your subscription key. So those 3 things you find on the app on your application page here. And by doing this getting started piece here, so by doing this piece here, you're storing those 3 pieces of data into the script, the copy of the script that you own. So it's just like taking those 3, keys of data and just storing them into the copy of the script that you own. And then the next piece, essentially the first command that gets run, is just going ahead and authorizing. It's authorizing against Blackbaud because it has all of that data. So I'm not sure if that answers your question. I hope it does. But I'm going to keep rolling. And then if I didn't answer your question, Brian, feel free to just like bump me again on the chat here. Okay. Is this a clean write on the spreadsheet every hour? Or are there just, great question. Great. So it is a clean update every hour currently. When I was just wiping the sheet and it's dumping it in again. And how I'm using it is that this is not something that you edit the sheet, because the sheet is just a way to see the data in a different way. So I'm not posting or putting any changes back right now. We haven't had the need to do that. I've looked a little bit into it from the contact card side of things, but we haven't really had a need personally. So this is we're just doing pulls. Okay. Can you give some advice on how to handle huge lists of lists? Yes, it does iterate. This one that I copied, I don't think worked because I copied it like 2 days ago. But what I do the other day, so there's, let me see if I can get into the code and show this off really fast. Mind the dirty code, folks. All right, page, sync the lists, syncing the lists. So there's a way here. Yeah. So essentially what I'm doing is when you go ahead and pull into the list, it's saying, what page number is it returning and how many records are in that page. And then I was able to, again, trial and error to figure out how Blackbaud's returning that data. So that way, if it was 1,000, if it had 1,000 results, then I would iterate into the next page and then return it. And if the results on the next page were under 1,000 results, that would be the last part of the loop. So that way it would keep on going until theoretically the page is ended. So hopefully that answers that question. Can you talk about the security API set and how your extension is storing API secrets? Yeah. So the app script, the Blackbaud API app secrets and tokens are stored within the app script file that you own, that you have a copy of, and you're unless you share it with somebody else on your team, that I do not own, right? So even if it's pulling from a central library or anything like that, the tokens and stuff are stored locally on your thing. Hopefully that answers your question, Hudson. Can a database admin control permissions for API endpoints? I don't need to post, but I love you. Yeah. So I didn't go through that specifically with the setup because we just don't have a ton of time. So let me show it. So if I go to my applications and I just go to one of these. So when you do the setup, you've got to put your redirect URI in here. This is where you get like the application ID and the secret and all that jazz. And you also need to set up the scope. So for the two things that I've built out, I'm only doing read. I'm only doing education management read. So you would go in here, you would go limited access, and you would set up education management read. So you can do for education management read, write, and delete. And for all of the things, you could do read, write, and delete, or read and write for this one. So hopefully that answers your question, TJ, about like being able to control those permissions a bit. It's not a endpoint by endpoint. It's more like tool by tool, but you can break it down with read, write, or delete. Okay. I hope I'm answering people's questions because it's kind of weird that I'm just talking to myself. Okay, so does it require cloud, Google Cloud Platform, Access Cloud Platform? So no, this is not leveraging Google Cloud's platform. So this is just a spreadsheet tied to a container-bound app script file, which is this file, and the only other thing I'm pulling in here is the app script OAuth2 library. But there's no Google Cloud platform stuff that's working on here. All right, I'm wondering about how, Brian, I think that was a repeat from before. And if not, if I didn't answer your question, I'm happy to go back. Just say so. When you make this develop all of this using and generate. Yes, absolutely. I totally agree with you about using a generic master Google account. So I'm demoing off of my account right now, but a lot of the scripts that I have running around, I have on our Google admin account or our help desk account, which is more, as service account is, you could think without it being a service account, right? Something that will live beyond me and keep running beyond me. So I absolutely think for continuity, trying to create or run these things off of more departmental accounts or however you want to call it, rather than just a specific user account. Yeah. Lucius has a tabs. Great question. I have not had an issue with that, only because I haven't done about 100 tabs. So that's a great question that I do not know the answer to, of how many, what the maximum limit on Google Sheet number of tabs is. In theory, I guess if you were pulling in more than 100 lists that were syncing, you could do this in 2 different spreadsheets if you wanted to, and have it going that much. I would be a little concerned, as I am in general, about like Blackbaud API quota limits. And I think if you were someone who was really diving into this and doing a lot, then you would want to kind of dive into the code and maybe tweak the triggers so that it wasn't happening as often. So that way you weren't maxing out your quotas every day. And I'm happy to kind of talk through that in detail when it comes to it. Just more available APIs. Yeah, Lisa, I haven't. Sorry, let me make sure I answer all your. Yeah, I mean, I haven't had a ton of issues with deprecation. I feel like some of that stuff has, there were a lot of changes in the last couple of years, and some of the stuff has kind of remained the same at this point. My next step, and I'm partnering with some other folks, is like, leveraging this with Looker as a way to, or Looker Studio as a way to kind of like have, a different idea of, being able to create those dashboards with this live data. But I haven't done it personally yet because school year just ended, and I'm just kind of staying on my feet. But yeah, I think that's a great thing to do, is moving away from Sheets. I know some folks are using the cloud platform as ways to store data not in Sheets. But for me and my purposes, Sheets gives me the ability to do what I want to do with the data. And it's not always about dashboarding. It's about syncing, sharing data out with other users in the community. And Sheets just is like kind of like the lowest, easiest bar there. Yeah, and yes, I know that the Sheets and Power BI, a lot of easy connections there. And I know there's some official partnerships with or connections with Power BI and Blackbaud that makes this really easy as well. Again, different place for different things, and this is what's working for me. And I'm hoping that if folks are interested, you fill out that form, and I'll happily be in touch with you after the fact. I know we're like at the very end, and I'm talking a lot. But any other questions, or anybody else want to raise your hand and come on up and ask a question on our last 3-4 minutes here? If not, I appreciate your time. Oh, we got one more. We have time for one more. So, okay. I guess this we're using. I think that's a great question. So I just talked with somebody the other day who was like, "Hey, can we use this for Razor's Edge or Financial Edge or things like that?" And there are endpoints there. I just haven't had to use them myself. So if I go to the API reference here, so right there's Razor's Edge and Financial Edge stuff here, right? So you can come in, I don't know what you're looking for, what you're looking to use, right? Constituent maybe. And you could see, okay, what are the different endpoints that you could use in Razor's Edge? And there's a lot, very different results here. So I personally am not using any of that stuff, but if you're willing to put a little bit of the brain power into look at the code, I mean, bringing in all of my lists to bringing in, all of my locations or whatever. I mean, it's almost as simple as just changing out this one URL in the code and just tweaking it slightly, and it's good to go. So in my mind, the hardest thing is the authentication and the authorization. Once you're done with that, everything else should be pretty easy. So I know we're out of time. I appreciate the thoughts in the chat, folks. So, but if anybody has any last minute questions, feel free. And if not, please, if you're interested in hearing more, feel free to fill out that form. And Lizzie just sent a survey as well. So thank you so much, folks. And I see one last thing since we're finishing here, but I think that's it for us.